Miami.
Miami. Miami is not mon ami. When I did a documentary in which I visited all the states of America, naturally, when people said, gosh, you've been, I drove in a London black cab from Maine all the way down the coast and round and up and down and up until I ended up in Washington State. Didn't take the taxi to Alaska and Hawaii, but went separately to Alaska and Hawaii. So I did go to every state. So not unnaturally, when people have said, gosh, you've been to every state of the Union, which one did you like best? And I try and answer that I never know quite what to say. I say I like South Kentana, a mixture of Kentucky, Montana, South Carolina, and maybe Northern California would suit me. It's very hard to pick a favorite. But then they'd say, which one did you dislike most? And I always said Florida. It has its charms. Northern Florida, this is the peculiarity of America, Northern Florida is the South. Northern Florida is like Alabama or Georgia, which border it. But Southern Florida, where Miami is and Orlando, is, to me, it's a Gehenna, it's hell. It's rude and sort of brash and just nasty and glitzy and unpleasant, and I couldn't wait to be shot at the place. I mean, it's got a lot of hot weather and beaches, but they sort of ruin them with hideous architecture. There's the South Beach, has some nice pastel deco, but even that's become pretty grim now. I just didn't like it. It just struck me as, it's full of nightclubs and pumped up people, physically sort of shiny with pumped upness. A lot of blusher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Norwich City.
On the Bold City. Yes, well, we've gone up. We were champions of League One. I come from Norfolk, and so if you're going to support a football team, you might, if you're in West Norfolk, support the Linnets from King's Lynn, who are in terrible trouble, I'm sorry to say. But it's more likely, of course, because you want to watch professional football of a reasonably high standard, you'd support the Canaries, who are Norwich City. And so, one's gone through their trials and tribulations and their sort of mediocre successes, and into the age of Delia, as we call it, and the extraordinary joy and satisfaction that has brought, both because of the commitment and sheer bloody money that she has given the club, but also publicity of a kind you could never hope to get. When one famous dark night of the soul, she decided to get up and yell at the entire Barclays stand and the cameras with her famous "Let's Be Having You," which is just one of the great moments in football history. I think it's phenomenal. Not everybody loves football. I love a lot of sport, and football I particularly like, but I'm not saying this just because I like Norwich. I think there's some real pleasure in supporting a team like Norwich rather than having the burden of Arsenal or Chelsea or Man U or Liverpool, because you so expect them to win. So even when they win, it's somehow not quite good enough. You just sort of, yeah, but it was only 2-0. Or, yeah, but, it was a double, but it wasn't a treble. It's just like every time and when they lose, it's like they've been punched, and all that money and all those players and all those Ferraris and all these, wags and that whole world. It's just, whereas a local team, when Norwich win, it is, wow, they won. I can't believe it. You're so happy. And if they lose, you make a joke about it. It's kind of, oh, well, obviously, and you sort of don't mind. That's the point, is that the risk-reward ratio is so fabulous, as it were. There's nothing to be unhappy about supporting Norwich, because it's always a kind of course it's terrible if they go down, and if they're in such terrible condition that they would lose their, there'd be a share crisis or something, but they're sort of reasonably prosperous for who they are, and there's just nothing but good to be got out of supporting them. But incidentally, do you know the three sides in Britain that are rude, that have swear words in? Right, there's Arsenal, Scunthorpe, and Manchester United. Silly joke, isn't it?
And on that sweet note, Stephen, Oscar.
Oscar. Well, you can probably tell I can talk about him forever. Thing I always say about Oscar, and if you've heard this before, forgive me, because I don't quite know how else to phrase it, but if you know New York City, if you know Manhattan, and when you go down Fifth Avenue, and I literally mean down because it's one way, and it goes down to the Village, you pass the Empire State Building, which is, was for many years the highest building in the world, and it's still jolly high. And of course, naturally, if you're a curious tourist, you will pass it and you will look up, but you won't really see it because it may be very tall, but there'll be a building nearer you that can be as short as anything, but it will blot it out by in the way that even a person can be taller than it if you're very close to that person. But if you get a good run of green lights, you go all the way down, it seems to rise like a Saturn V rocket as all the closer buildings are dwarfed and they appear to be pygmies, and it comes up in its true size. And I think as 1900 gave way to the year 2000, 100 years after the death of Oscar Wilde, he did that. Every year that passed, he got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we saw what an extraordinarily great man he was. Not just, of course, a wit, and like Falstaff, a cause of wit in others. Not just, if you like, almost a messianic figure in that he was despised and rejected of men, but as Ellman says at the end of his biography, he stands before us now so wise, so kind, and so right. It's extraordinary how right he is about everything. And throughout the 80s and 90s, as I began to get a bit well known, I'd be asked occasionally to do a debate at a university or to give a talk at a college, and sometimes you get you go back and there'd be a party in someone's rooms and you'd drink wine and coffee and all the rest of it, and I began to notice that whereas when I was a student, what people would have on their walls would be Che Guevara, obviously, John Lennon, Jimi Hendrix, Lenin, Marx. As the 80s gave way to the 90s, and since the death of Lennon and the rise of super commercialism in rock music, young people were no longer under the illusion that revolutionary politics or rock and roll would set the world free or make anybody happy. And you would start to see posters of Einstein and, above all, Oscar, because he symbolized the fact that